She's the counseling pastor here at First Church, but she's also the director of Adult and Teen Challenge of the Cumberlands here in Overton County. So this is a wonderful opportunity for you to hear from an apostolic leader in this region.
Actually, he just didn't have anybody else he could ask, and I happened to be there in front of him, and so, correct? So we're going to stand for the reading of God's Word. We're going to open up the Word in John 15. One through 17. I didn't give it to you, and I'm so sorry. Just now dawned on me. Okay. John 15, 1 through 17. I am the true grapevine, and my God is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do not bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slave because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father has told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love each other. Let's pray. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. You may be seated. If you have been at my house since spring, you will see that I have had a fight going on in my front yard. I haven't put mulch down since it's been over a year. So when there's nothing there and there's rain that falls, guess what comes up in the place of where there's no mulch? So I have weeds. Well, not as many, right, boys? I have weeds that at times this summer have been this high. I have roses that are gone crazy, and none of my bushes have been trimmed. Started last Sunday. I started. But they still are wild. And God has always done things in the physical for me so he can show me in the spiritual of what's going on. So we're going to take a look at this chapter. But earlier this week when John was talking to me, he doesn't know that my music that I have surround sound in my house had been it just wasn't working. I couldn't get Pandora to talk to my sound system. And everything that I was doing was not working. And so I finally had to relinquish that and say, Joey, I need some help. And when he fixed it, the very first song that came on is a song that I had never heard before. I don't even know when the song came out. I assume it's a newer song, but I don't know. And I'm going to read you the song, the verses, and we will sing it later. But I want you to hear the verses and compare it to the chapter, or part of the chapter that I just read you. The name of the song is Tend. How many of you have heard that song? Oh my gosh, it kicked my tail. Excuse me, I hope that doesn't offend anybody. Tend. In the landscape of my life, you don't rush through any season. You always take your time, a careful hand, a gentle guide. You take what's dead away, and you prune what's running wild. Through the winter, I'm still alive. What you've planted in the dirt is ever reaching to the light. You prepared me for darkened times. You sustained what you have started, and you'll teach me to abide. And the interlude says, have your way in me. Have your way in me. Let it grow, let it grow, let it grow. I'll remain in you. You'll remain in me, and I will trust your timing. I'll remain in you. You'll remain in me from the start until the end, because you know better. And the chorus is where it really started getting me. So be the gardener of my heart, tend the soil of my soul, break up the fallow ground, cut back the overgrown, and I won't shy away. I will let the branches fall, so what can stay and what you love can grow. Isn't that a lovely song? So the Lord is speaking to me about my yard through that song, because in the physical, my yard is going crazy, but in my spiritual walk, there's some things that had gotten hard in my heart. See, when you get busy and you let busyness dictate your time, you don't always hear God like you're supposed to. Now, I got up every morning and read the Word, or I'd be really bad. Lord knows what my front yard would have looked like if I hadn't been reading the Word. But was I always allowing it to fall on fertile ground? It wasn't, because I was too busy. So we're going to go back to John 15. One of the things that Jesus said at the very first of this, he said, I am. And if you read through the book of John, 7 times Jesus talks to and refers to himself as I am. Who else referred to themselves as I am? Come on, guys. God did. And who did he say it to? Abraham. He said, I am. And so those Jewish boys, when they heard him say, I am, do you think they understood who he really was? I think by this point in the game, they might have. But when the first time he said it, earlier in the book of John, I'm not sure they would have. Jesus says, looks at himself and calls himself, I am, 7 times. Jesus is speaking to the disciples now, and it's just him and the 12. Well, probably by this time it was the 11. And Jesus had washed their feet. They're in the upper room. He'd washed their feet. He'd predicted his betrayal. He'd predicted that Peter was going to deny him. And now he's teaching them as friends. You know how you have those conversations with your friends? You're just sitting down and y'all are just interacting. That's what Jesus was doing with his disciples. But as he was referring to himself as the vine here, reckon those Jewish boys would have thought back in Isaiah, where that was first brought in, Isaiah 5. I'm going to read that to you. Isaiah 5, 1 through 7. Now I will sing for the one I love a song about his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a rich and fertile hill. He plowed the land, cleared its stones, and planted it with best vines. In the middle, he built a watchtower and carved a winepress in the nearby rocks. Then he waited for a harvest of sweet grapes. But the grapes that grew were bitter. Guys, that was Israel. Reckon the disciples were wondering whether he was calling them bitter? He goes on in Isaiah. Now, you people of Jerusalem and Judah, you judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard that I have not already done? When I expected sweet grapes, why did my vineyard give me bitter grapes? Now let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will tear down its hedges and let it be destroyed. I will break down its walls and let the animals trample it. I will make it a wild place where the vines are not pruned, kind of like my front yard, and the ground is not hoed, a place overgrown with briars and thorns. I will command the clouds to drop no rain on it. The nation of Israel is the vineyard of the Lord of heaven's armies. The people of Judah are his pleasant garden. He expected a crop of justice, but instead he found opposition. He expected to find righteousness, but instead he heard cries of violence. In this verse, in the Old Testament, Israel is compared to a vineyard under God's loving care. But now, Jesus is telling those disciples that he is the vine, and that God is the gardener, and he is the grapevine, and the disciples are the offshoots from the main grapevine, and in order for them to grow, they must abide in him. What does that mean to abide? Someone give me a definition of what it means to abide. I've got 62-year-old ears. Steady? What'd you say? To dwell, yeah. To stead. To remain. To follow. Those are all examples. Exactly. They had to abide in him. He tells them if they abide in him, he will abide or remain in them. Because if they don't, no fruit will come from their lives. And as they abide, God is going to come along and prune the areas of the disciples' lives that do not bear fruit. And that's why they must abide in him. But if they didn't abide with him, and if they just went off on their own, they would be cut off and thrown into a bushel or into a pile, and they'd be burned. Guys, those are scary thoughts for me. That if I don't follow after the Lord and give him my all, and if I choose to do things on Tina's time and Tina's way, and I forget about the Lord, I could be in that pile. See, Jesus knew at that point that Judas was in that pile. And he didn't want any of the other ones to become useless branches. See, when I started cutting back my bushes and I dropped those old branches off, and they're still in my yard. I haven't had a chance to rake them up. They're withered. Guys, apart from the vine, we wither and we die. If I don't get up every morning, and I'm not a morning person, but if I don't get up in time to read the Word, I starve during the day. So one of the ways that we abide is we stay in the Word. We worship. And guys, we can read words on the page, and that's reading, but is it reading you? Is the Word convicting you? Is it bringing life? Now, I'm telling you, the reason I can say these words to you is because he convicted me of this. I was reading a whole lot. I was reading every day. But I was not giving him time to read me. I don't know the last time I sat and journaled because the Word spoke to me. Because I was just too busy. But if his word remains in them, they will remain in him. They could ask anything in his name, and he would grant it. And then they would be called his true disciples. And then I felt like he went into another level of intimacy with them, beginning at verse 10. He said that he had love for them, and then he said, and this looks like obeying me. This looks like overflowing with joy. And then he went on to say, and in order for that to happen, you got to also love each other. And he goes on to say to them, you're no longer a slave, but you're chosen by me. Can you imagine sitting at the same table with Jesus and him saying, I'm chosen? That I've chosen you? That you're mine? That you're not a slave, but you're a friend? For me, being chosen as a friend was always something that I was afraid of, because so many of my friends growing up used me. And when you've come from an abusive background, trust is not something you have. And so when Jesus chose me and began to pour out his love on me, I learned to love others. Let's look at this chapter now as how it applies to all of us. It's self-taught. All of this is stuff you go, well, this is nothing rocket science. But I want you to hear a few things that he showed me. God is our gardener. And I want you to realize what a gardener by its definition is. It's one who tends and cultivates a garden. We first have to allow him to tend and to cultivate us. And some synonyms of the word cultivate are some pretty interesting words. To nurture, to foster, to support, to enrich, to improve, and to develop. Do we allow the Lord to do those things in us as the gardener? Do we allow him to do those things? Do we allow him to nurture us, to improve us, to develop us into who he wants us to be? He has invited us, but have we allowed him to do the work in us? God is going to do the work, the dirt work, to make us healthy. That's what a gardener does. Our roots have to be healthy so that we can abide with Jesus. Are we abiding in Jesus? Are we in the Word? Are we getting fed? Is obedience in your vocabulary? I read a book several years ago. It was called The Insanity of Obedience. Now, I'm telling you, if you want to have yourself stretched, read that book. How many of you have read that book? It's by Nick Ripken. If you want to borrow it, I have it. It will change you, though. On my patio doors, as you come in my house, most of you have been in my house, but I have a patio door that goes out to the deck, and on the left-hand side, the second grouping of words is "my obedience" is written. It's been there for years, especially after I read the book, because I need to be reminded often, my obedience is important. When my kids were little, we used to say delayed obedience is still disobedience. And I have to remind myself that often. Tina, if the Lord tells you to do something, delayed obedience is still disobedience. So obedience. Are we obedient to the Word and to the Spirit that's in our lives? In this book, Nick Ripken drew a big picture for us. And here's one of the things that he tells you in the book about obedience. It didn't necessarily mean we had to live it, that we understood it. It didn't mean that we had to see the big picture. And here was the one that made me really think. It didn't mean we had to live through it. We just had to be obedient. We just needed to be willing to obey. So the next thing that after obedience that Jesus asked the disciples, he said, "Is there joy?" Because he said joy would be overflowing from their life. Is there joy in your life? Is there joy in my life? Joy is not happiness. Joy is something that's in you. That's a fruit from Galatians 5. It's a fruit of the Spirit. So it's not contingent on what's going on in your life. One of the things that was spoken by my brother-in-laws, they didn't understand how I could have so much joy in the midst of Craig's death. It didn't mean that I was full of happiness. It meant that they could see a joy living in me. Guys, that's a fruit of the Spirit. It's not something we wish for. We just ask for it, and He gives us. It's not something we can well up in us. It's something that's given to us. If we have the fruit in our life, there is joy despite what we're walking through. And there's also peace. And if Miss Connie was up here, she would sing that song for you about the fruits of the Spirit. Is there love in you? He didn't say you had to love the people that look like you. He said you had to love others. We have to love ones that don't look like us, don't act like us, don't smell like us, may not believe like us. We're supposed to just love them despite their beliefs. One of the first things that the Lord showed me when I began to do ministry in Las Casas, we had, and this is a really strange ministry, but we had a head lice ministry. And because in the school system where I taught, I had to check all the kids for head lice. What an awesome job, I'm telling you. But most of those kids came from homes where they couldn't afford to buy the head lice medicine, the stuff to wash the sheets and to treat the couches. And so after the kids had come in, and I would check their head, and if they had little critters in their hair, then I would give them a bag, and I would tell them how to do their hair, and then I would call their parents and tell them they had to go home. But then I would explain to the parents what they needed to do. And it's amazing how in that time, I could always talk to them about Jesus. And see, I was in the ministry part of my day, so I could do whatever I wanted to. I could talk about Jesus to those parents. And we had a family that was a single mom. She had 3 kids, and those kids had head lice repeatedly because of the job their mother did of bringing in men into their homes. You can let your mind imagine what she did. There was always head lice in the home. And so I would spend hours with those 3 children picking nits out of their head and talking to them about Jesus and how much Jesus loved them. I don't know how old those kids are now. That would have been 25 years ago. But I know my God. I know they remember about the times where we talked about Jesus as I was pulling things out of their hair. But more than that, they saw the love that I had for them. Because that's not a fun job. Those of you who have ever done that, it's not something that you want to do. That's showing love to those who may not be like you. have we availed ourselves to the gardener's pruning? When was the last time you said, Lord, show me? Show me what's dead. Show me what needs to be pruned. See, a pruning isn't meaning that it's dead. Pruning means there's fruit there, but there's more that can be there. So if we prune off those ends, it will produce more fruit. How many of you said, Lord, I want more fruit? How many of you said, Lord, prune off. Show me what needs to be changed. Show me what's dead that needs to be dismissed from my life. We have to avail ourselves to the gardener. He wants to reshape us. He wants to cut off the things that have gone wild. He wants to put things in our soil that causes us to be not as hard-hearted. He wants to fertilize our soil. What is in your soil that needs to be changed? Is your soil hard? When was the last time you spent time on your face before the Lord so that He could wreck you, so that you could be changed? All areas need to be brought to the triune God for His hand to shape us and to cut off things that need to be cut off so that we can bring glory to Him. Allow Him today. We're going to close with the song that I read to you, but we're going to close it and sing it. And I want to invite you to come, or wherever you are sitting, but I want you to ask the Lord, Lord, what is in me that has gone wild? What in me is dead that needs to be cut off? What in my walk needs to be reshaped, redefined? What is it that you want to do in me so that I can bring glory to you? I want to invite you to come forward, and the Lord will meet you here. The one thing that I want you to hear that the Lord said to me while we were worshiping, if there's any bare spaces in your heart that have not been set and given to Him, Satan will come in and he will plant weeds. Why did I have so many weeds in my rose garden? Because I didn't have anything there taking the place, and so the weeds had ample opportunity to move in. So allow the Lord to fill you up today.
Amen.
So there's no place for weeds to grow, for pointy stickers to get in.